The first thing they noticed wasn't the sound. It was the silence. Every new student who entered the Grand Orion Academy made some kind of impression. The towering warriors from the volcanic moons announced themselves with armor that rattled like distant thunder. The crystalline scholars from Lyran Prime shimmered beneath the ceiling lights. Even the tiny insectoid delegates filled the corridors with the constant whisper of clicking limbs. But when the classroom doors slid open that morning, the girls stepped inside without making a sound at all. Not a footstep, not a rustle, not even a change in the airflow. Professor Zirin paused in the middle of explaining stellar ecosystems. 47 students from 32 different civilizations slowly turned toward the entrance. Standing there was a young woman unlike anyone they had ever seen. She looked fragile. She wore a dark green jacket over a gray shirt, faded blue trousers, and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Loose strands of chestnut hair framed her face, and curious hazel eyes quietly studied the room before settling on the professor. She smiled politely. It wasn't a broad smile, just a small, warm expression. "Sorry," she said softly. "Am I late?" The translator implanted inside every student's auditory system instantly converted her unfamiliar language. Professor Zirin cleared his throat. "Not at all. Please come in." He looked around the lecture hall. "Class, this is our newest exchange student." He hesitated. There was something strange about the way he spoke her introduction. As part of the Galactic Integration Initiative, Miss Maya Carter will complete the remainder of the semester with us. The room remained silent. "She comes from the planet Earth." Several students exchanged confused glances. Earth. Very few had heard of it. Those who had only knew it had joined the Galactic Assembly less than a year earlier. Information about the planet remained heavily restricted, which, by itself, was unusual. Every civilization participating in exchange programs normally shared complete biological records before sending students abroad. Earth hadn't. Professor Zirin gestured toward an empty seat near the center row. "You may sit there." "Thank you." Maya walked down the aisle. Her movements caught more attention than her appearance. She wasn't stiff. She wasn't overly cautious. She simply moved with effortless balance. Each step flowed into the next so naturally that it seemed almost impossible to tell exactly when one foot left the ground and the other touched it. Commander-class predator species moved with explosive precision. Prey species shuffled nervously. Maya did neither. She walked like flowing water. By the time she reached her desk, nearly every student was watching her. She placed her backpack on the floor, sat down, folded her hands, and immediately focused on the lecture as though nothing unusual had happened. One student couldn't stop staring. His name was Kale, a second-year xenobiology specialist from the world Nerith. Unlike most intelligent species, the people of Nerith possessed extremely sensitive sensory crests that lined both sides of their heads. Those organs could detect vibrations through air, temperature fluctuations, chemical traces, and even tiny movements across solid surfaces. His people had evolved on a dangerous world where failing to notice movement often meant becoming someone else's meal. For Kale, silence was impossible. Everything moved. Everything made vibrations. Everything left traces. Everything, except the human. He hadn't sensed the classroom door opening. He hadn't sensed her footsteps. He hadn't even noticed another heartbeat entering the room until he'd physically looked toward the entrance. That should have been impossible. After class ended, Kale hurried toward the Academy archives. He accessed the public galactic species database. Species: human, homeworld, Earth, status, integration candidate, planetary biology, restricted, atmospheric analysis, restricted, evolutionary history, restricted, military assessment, restricted, behavioral profile, restricted. Kale frowned. Almost every category had been sealed. Only one section remained visible: dietary classification, adaptive omnivore. He blinked. Adaptive? That wasn't a normal biological category. Omnivores simply consumed plants and animals. Adaptive omnivores changed according to available resources. It implied something else, something unsettling. Creatures that couldn't afford to be picky. Creatures capable of surviving almost anywhere. Kale closed the file. His curiosity had only grown. Across campus, Maya sat alone beneath one of the academy's floating gardens. She opened a small lunch container she'd brought from Earth. Inside were sandwiches, apple slices, and something wrapped in paper. She sighed happily. I missed real food. She took a bite, then looked around. Every table nearby remained empty. Students glanced toward her, then quietly chose somewhere else to sit. Maya noticed. Of course she noticed. She simply pretended she hadn't. Being alone wasn't new. She'd expected this. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community. Everyone was cautious. She couldn't blame them. Still, it stung. A shadow appeared beside her table. May I sit? She looked up. It was Kale. He seemed nervous. Very nervous. Of course. He carefully lowered himself into the opposite chair. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Kale asked, "Your planet?" "Yes." "Is it dangerous?" Maya smiled. "Depends where you stand." He tilted his head. "I don't understand." She laughed quietly. "If you're standing in a city, probably not. If you're standing in front of a hungry bear." She shrugged. "Your day probably isn't going very well." Kale's sensory crest flattened. "Bear." "Oh," she realized. "You don't know what bears are." "I do not." "They're—" She searched for the right words. "Large furry omnivores. Usually, they can weigh over 600 kilograms." Kale nearly dropped his tablet. "Usually?" "Well," she smiled awkwardly. "There are bigger ones." Silence. Long silence. Finally he whispered, "And humans live with these creatures?" Maya nodded. "Sometimes. We try not to. But yes." Kale suddenly understood why Earth's biological files were classified. Maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't that Earth was hiding information. Maybe the Galactic Council simply hadn't figured out how to explain it. That evening, far above the Academy, inside a secured orbital station, several officials watched Maya's first-day recordings. One of them finally spoke. "Any incidents?" "No." "Any biological contamination?" "Negative." "Behavioral concerns?" "None." The senior director leaned back. "And the students?" "They've already begun noticing." He sighed. "I expected as much." Another officer looked toward the screen where Maya laughed at something Kale had said. "Do you think they're ready?" "No. Neither are we." He switched off the recording. "But eventually, they're going to learn what humanity really is." And when that happened, the entire galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The following morning, Maya arrived before sunrise. She had always preferred quiet mornings. Back on Earth, she would often jog before classes began, enjoying the peaceful streets while most people were still asleep. Old habits were hard to break. The academy grounds were beautiful at dawn. Artificial waterfalls flowed down silver cliffs. Floating gardens drifted lazily between towering academic buildings. Bird-like alien creatures glided through the purple morning sky. It almost made her forget she was several hundred light years from home. Almost. She found an empty bench overlooking a crystal lake and began reading through her xenobiology notes. "You study before class?" The voice startled her. Kale stood behind the bench, carrying 2 steaming cups. "I wasn't trying to sneak up on you," he said quickly. Maya laughed. "You didn't." He blinked. "But I made no sound." "I know." "Then how?" She smiled. "I heard your breathing." Kale froze. "My breathing. And your footsteps." "I cannot hear my own footsteps." Most humans probably couldn't either. She accepted the drink he offered. "What is this?" "A herbal infusion." She took a cautious sip. It tasted surprisingly pleasant. "Thanks." Kale hesitated. "I wish to apologize." "For what?" "For yesterday." She looked confused. "You sat alone." "Oh." She shrugged. "I'm getting used to it." "No." Kale shook his head. "The others aren't being cruel. They're afraid." Maya smiled sadly. "I figured." He lowered his voice. "Your species records are classified. Nobody knows why. They assume the worst." She stared at the rippling lake. They're probably not wrong. By the third day, rumors had spread across the academy. Some students claimed humans possessed hidden claws. Others believed they could see in complete darkness. One particularly imaginative rumor insisted humans could survive in open space without protective suits. Maya overheard two first-year students whispering as she walked past. "Don't make eye contact. I heard that's how predators choose targets." She almost laughed. Instead, she simply kept walking. That afternoon, Professor Zirin announced a laboratory exercise. Today's assignment involved analyzing the cellular structure of mineral-based microorganisms. Students were paired randomly. The classroom display flashed. "Kale, Maya Carter." Kale swallowed nervously. Maya smiled. "Looks like we're partners." "I suppose we are." The experiment began smoothly. Kale was surprised. Despite arriving only days earlier, Maya understood advanced scientific procedures remarkably well. "You've studied xenobiology before?" "A little. A little." She grinned. "I was planning to become a doctor before joining the exchange program." "You study medicine?" "Biomedical sciences." Kale tilted his head. "So your species repairs its own bodies?" "Mostly." He assumed she was joking. Halfway through the experiment, Professor Zirin carried in several sealed biological samples. "Be careful," he warned. "These containers are fragile." Students nodded. Maya carefully reached for one of the glass cylinders. Unfortunately, someone bumped the table. The cylinder slipped. She reacted instantly. Her hand shot forward. She caught it. Unfortunately, her grip was just a little too strong. Crack. The reinforced laboratory glass shattered inside her hand. Tiny fragments scattered across the workstation. The classroom fell silent. "Oops." A thin cut appeared across Maya's palm. Bright red blood slowly emerged. She stared at it. "Seriously?" She sighed. "That's annoying." Kale wasn't looking at the cut. He was staring at the blood. It was red. Not blue. Not green. Not translucent. Red. Deep crimson. One drop landed on the laboratory floor. Nearby students suddenly stiffened. A reptilian student backed away. Another covered their breathing vents. Someone whispered, "What is that smell?" Professor Zirin hurried over. "Maya, are you all right?" "I'm fine." She grabbed a cloth from the workstation and wrapped it around her hand. "Just a scratch." Kale couldn't move. His sensory crests were overwhelmed. The metallic scent flooded the room. His species naturally analyzed airborne chemicals. The result terrified him. Iron. Her blood contained astonishing amounts of iron. His heartbeat accelerated. That concentration shouldn't exist inside a living organism. Not naturally. Not safely. Within moments, the academy medical staff arrived. A scanner swept across Maya's injured hand. One doctor frowned. "Interesting." Another looked twice. "Run the scan again." The machine confirmed the same result. Healing had already begun. Only 3 minutes had passed. Fresh tissue was forming beneath the damaged skin. The lead physician looked directly at Maya. "Does this hurt?" "A little." "You aren't dizzy?" "No." "Nausea?" "No." "Difficulty moving your fingers?" She flexed them. "They're fine." The doctor slowly lowered the scanner. "Incredible." Maya looked embarrassed. "Did I break another piece of equipment?" Professor Zirin rubbed his forehead. "Yes. I'm really sorry. It's not the equipment that concerns us." Outside the laboratory, groups of students whispered anxiously. "She shattered reinforced glass." "I heard she didn't even realize." "Did you smell her blood?" "My species has never encountered anything like it." "I heard the doctors quarantined the sample." "No. They classified it." Kale quietly walked away. His mind raced. That evening, he returned to the academy archives. For the first time in his academic career, he requested restricted access. The archive intelligence paused, then granted temporary viewing permission. A heavily censored report appeared. Planetary Survey, Earth. Most sections remained blacked out. Only one sentence remained visible. Earth evolved under gravity nearly twice the galactic average. Kale reread it 5 times. Twice. Every muscle. Every bone. Every organ inside Maya's body had evolved under conditions that would exhaust most intelligent species. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her grip, her balance, her endurance, even the way she moved. She wasn't unusually strong for a human. She was normal. Elsewhere, Maya sat alone inside her dormitory. She gently removed the bandage. The cut had almost disappeared. She sighed. So much for keeping a low profile. Her communicator buzzed. Incoming secure transmission. She answered. An older woman appeared on the screen. Dr. Elena Brooks, head of Earth's Exchange Initiative. How are you settling in? Maya smiled weakly. I accidentally broke laboratory equipment. Elena closed her eyes. Already. I didn't mean to. I know. They're beginning to notice. They were always going to notice. Maya looked down. I just wanted them to see me. Not what I am. The older woman smiled gently. Maya, you aren't a weapon. You aren't a monster. You're simply human. Maya looked unconvinced. What if they don't see the difference? Dr. Brooks didn't answer immediately. Instead, she quietly said, then show them. 3 days passed after the laboratory incident. No one openly avoided Maya. No one insulted her. But the atmosphere around her had changed. Conversations grew quieter when she approached. Students who once ignored her now watched from a distance. Curiosity had replaced indifference. Fear had replaced curiosity. Maya hated it. She hadn't crossed half the galaxy to become another classified mystery. She had come to make friends. Instead, she was becoming a legend. On Friday morning, every student received the same notification. Mandatory physical assessment. All exchange students were required to complete a standardized fitness evaluation before participating in field expeditions. The announcement drew groans from every corner of the academy. Except Maya. She simply shrugged. Looks like PE. Kale looked confused. PE. Physical education. You have academic courses dedicated to exercise? She smiled. On Earth, everyone complains about them. The academy gymnasium was enormous. Towering observation platforms overlooked dozens of testing stations. Gravity-adjustable running tracks stretched across one side of the chamber. Strength analyzers lined another. Every piece of equipment had been recalibrated overnight. Professor Zirin noticed it immediately. So, he muttered, they've upgraded everything. One instructor nodded. Administration's orders. Students began rotating through stations. The first test measured reaction speed. Small drones fired harmless light pulses from random directions. Contestants had to touch each one before it disappeared. Several predator species posted astonishing times. Kale finished respectably. Maya stepped onto the platform next. Ready? Asked the instructor. As I'll ever be. The drones activated. Blue, red, green, yellow. Her hands moved smoothly. Not explosively. Not dramatically. Just efficiently. Every movement flowed into the next. When the test ended, the instructor checked the screen twice. Excellent consistency. She hadn't achieved the fastest reaction time. But unlike everyone else, her speed never dropped. Not once. Next came grip strength. Maya immediately looked nervous. Oh, she whispered. This one again. The instructor handed her the scanner. Simply squeeze. She remembered the broken laboratory glass. What if I? It is designed for heavy species. It won't break. She looked unconvinced. Carefully, very carefully, she squeezed. The display climbed. Class 2, 3, 4, 5. Students stopped talking. The number kept rising. 6. Several instructors leaned closer. 7. The machine beeped loudly. Maximum safe reading reached. Maya immediately released it. I'm sorry. The instructor blinked. You apologize after succeeding? I thought I squeezed too hard. Kale stared at the display. One of the largest species in the academy had achieved only slightly higher. And Maya weighed barely a fraction of his size. The endurance trial came next. Students mounted resistance cycles designed to simulate long-distance travel under varying gravity. Most participants pushed themselves aggressively from the beginning. Maya didn't. She settled into a comfortable rhythm. Kale noticed immediately. She's pacing herself. One instructor nodded thoughtfully. Interesting. 10 minutes passed. The first student stopped. 15. Half the class had finished. 25. Only 6 remained. 30. Only Maya and a towering athlete from the mountainous world of Bracus continued. The Bracus student breathed heavily. His massive shoulders trembled. Maya looked flushed, but calm. 34 minutes. The giant finally stepped off. Applause echoed through the gym. Maya kept pedaling. 38 minutes. 40. The chief instructor finally walked over. You may stop. She looked surprised. Oh, I wasn't finished. Soft laughter spread across the gym. Not mocking. Genuine. For the first time since arriving. People smiled because of her. Not because they feared her. The final assessment measured recovery speed. Students rested inside monitoring chambers after exercise. Sensors recorded heart rate, breathing, temperature, muscle fatigue. Maya entered the chamber. 5 minutes later, the instructors exchanged puzzled looks. Her heart rate had already returned almost to normal. Body temperature stabilized rapidly. Blood oxygen levels remained exceptionally high. One doctor quietly whispered, "Her recovery is extraordinary." Another nodded. Everything about humans appears designed for repetition. When the assessments ended, results appeared on a massive holographic screen. Students crowded around. The rankings surprised everyone. Maya hadn't finished first. Not in strength, not in speed, not in reflexes, not in endurance. Several specialized species outperformed her in individual categories. But then they noticed something unusual. Every category showed the same pattern. Top 10%, top 8%, top 12%, top 7%, top 9%. She wasn't the best at anything. She was excellent at everything. Professor Zirin stared thoughtfully. A generalist. One instructor nodded. No weaknesses. Another quietly added, "That's rarer than perfection." As students began leaving, Kale caught up with Maya outside. "You seem disappointed." She looked surprised. "Do I? You ranked among the academy's best." She shrugged. "I wasn't trying to compete." "Then why are you disappointed?" She laughed softly. "I was hoping people would stop looking at me." Kale looked around. Dozens of students were indeed staring. Not fearfully this time. Wonderfully. Curiously. Respectfully. He smiled. "I don't believe that's going to happen." Maya sighed dramatically. "I knew I should have stayed average." "You call this average?" She grinned. "Back home. Pretty much." Kale stopped walking. "What?" She immediately realized what she'd said. "Oh, I mean." She rubbed the back of her neck. Most healthy humans would perform similarly. Kale slowly turned toward the academy buildings. For the first time, he truly understood. Everything he had witnessed, everything that had amazed the academy, wasn't exceptional. It was simply human. And that realization frightened him far more than Maya's strength ever had. That evening, deep beneath the academy, inside a secured conference chamber, senior officials gathered around a holographic display. Maya's assessment results floated above the table. An elderly alien adjusted his glasses. "She's adapting faster than expected." Another officer frowned. "No, the academy is adapting." Silence filled the room. Finally, the director spoke. "They still believe humanity's greatest advantage is physical capability." He deactivated the display. "They haven't discovered the truly dangerous part yet." One official asked quietly, "And what is that?" The director smiled faintly. "The human mind." The room fell silent. Because every classified report agreed on one terrifying conclusion. Human muscles had conquered Earth. But human curiosity would one day conquer the stars. The week after the physical assessments, the atmosphere around Maya shifted again. No one doubted that humans were capable anymore. Now they wanted to know how. Students who had never spoken to her suddenly greeted her in the corridors. Others watched from a respectful distance, whispering theories every time she passed. Maya appreciated the friendliness. She hated the attention. As she entered the cafeteria one morning, Kale was already waiting. "I saved you a seat." She smiled. "Thanks." He lowered his voice. You're becoming famous. I was hoping you'd say invisible. I'm afraid that's no longer possible. She sighed dramatically. I miss being boring. Kale chuckled. I don't think humans are capable of being boring. Later that day, Professor Zirin gathered the entire class inside the tactical simulation hall. Unlike normal classrooms, this chamber resembled the bridge of a starship. Hundreds of holographic projectors surrounded the room. Floating control panels hovered in the air. Every student immediately became excited. Professor Zirin smiled. Today's lesson is simple. No examinations. No written assignments. A ripple of relief spread through the room. We're conducting a crisis simulation. The room instantly became serious again. The purpose, Professor Zirin continued, is not to test strength. It is to evaluate decision-making under pressure. He activated the holographic display. A massive transport vessel appeared above the center of the room. The ship drifted helplessly through an asteroid field. Warning lights flashed across its hull. Hypothetical scenario. A civilian transport has suffered catastrophic engine failure. 500 passengers remain aboard. Communications are unstable. Life support will fail in 27 minutes. The students listened carefully. Your teams must save as many lives as possible. You may use any legal strategy. Groups of 4 were assigned automatically. Maya found herself paired with Kale, a crystalline engineering student named Sira, and a reptilian navigation specialist called Dravos. The countdown began. 27 minutes. Immediately, everyone started shouting ideas. We tow the vessel. No, stabilize the reactor first. Evacuate the civilians. Destroy the asteroids. Within seconds, the room descended into organized chaos. Except Maya's table. She simply watched the holographic map. Kale frowned. Aren't you going to suggest something? Not yet. We're losing time. I know. She kept studying the display. 25 minutes. 24. Finally she spoke. What caused the engine failure? Dravos blinked. What? The simulation says the engines failed. Why? Sira looked at the data. It doesn't specify. Exactly. Maya folded her arms. If we don't know why they failed, fixing them could make things worse. Her teammates looked at one another. No one else had asked that question. She zoomed in on the ship. Look here. Tiny impact marks covered one side of the transport. Micrometeor strikes. Kale nodded slowly. So, the damage isn't random. She highlighted a pattern. These impacts disabled external cooling. The engines overheated. They didn't fail first. They shut themselves down. Silence. Dravos stared at the display. I completely missed that. Maya smiled. My dad always told me to look for the first domino. Instead of ordering an immediate rescue, Maya proposed something entirely different. Repair the cooling system remotely. Then restart one engine. Use that engine to rotate the ship. Point the damaged side away from the asteroid stream. Then evacuate only if repairs fail. Kale looked amazed. That saves fuel. Sira added, and avoids exposing passengers to space. Professor Zirin quietly observed from across the room. Interesting. Very interesting. Meanwhile, other teams were making dramatic decisions. Some launched full rescue fleets. Others attempted risky tractor beam maneuvers. One team accidentally destroyed the simulated transport altogether. The room erupted with frustrated groans. 20 minutes later, Professor Zirin ended the exercise. Results appeared above each team. Most groups had saved between 60 and 70% of the passengers. One exceptionally skilled team reached 83%. Then Maya's team score appeared. 99.4% survival rate. The room became silent. Someone finally asked, how? Professor Zirin replayed the simulation. Instead of showing flashy maneuvers, the recording focused on Maya. She spent nearly 3 minutes doing nothing except observing. One student frowned. She wasted time. Professor Zirin smiled. Did she? The replay continued. Every decision afterward happened quickly. No hesitation. No confusion. Every action solved 2 problems instead of 1. By identifying the original cause, The team prevented 4 later disasters that every other group had encountered. The professor turned toward the class. What was today's lesson? A student answered, think before acting. Professor Zirin nodded. Exactly. As the students packed their equipment away, Kale caught up with Maya once again. I've noticed something. She raised an eyebrow. Only one thing. You never panic. She laughed. I panic all the time. I've never seen it. That's because panic happens up here. She tapped her forehead. My mom taught me something when I was little. What? If you're scared, she smiled. Breathe first. Then think. Kale quietly repeated the sentence to himself. Breathe first. Then think. It sounded so simple. Yet during the simulation, not one other student had done it. That evening, the Academy network exploded with discussion. Students weren't talking about Maya's strength anymore. They were talking about her decisions. Forums filled with comments. She solved the problem before everyone else even understood it. Humans don't rush? No, they observe first. That's far more dangerous. Far above the Academy, aboard the Orbital Observation Station, Director Alaric watched the simulation replay for the 3rd time. An officer stood beside him. She's exceeding expectations. Alaric shook his head. No, we underestimated expectations. He paused the recording at the exact moment Maya examined the engine damage. Did you notice? The officer looked confused. What? Every other student tried to save the ship. Maya tried to understand it. Silence. Alaric smiled faintly. This is why humanity advanced so quickly. They don't simply solve problems. They become obsessed with discovering why those problems exist. He looked through the station's observation window toward the distant Academy below. And curiosity, he whispered, is far more powerful than strength. Back in her dormitory, Maya sat by the window, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. She smiled softly. For the first time since arriving, she felt like she belonged. She still missed Earth. She still missed home. But maybe, just maybe, this strange academy was beginning to feel like one too. The announcement appeared on every student's communicator just after sunrise. Second year field exercise. Location, Valis Training Preserve. Duration, 48 hours. Objective, team survival and resource management. Unlike classroom simulations, this was real. The preserve covered nearly 500 square kilometers of forests, rocky canyons, rivers, and mountain terrain. Dangerous predators had been removed decades ago, but the environment itself remained unpredictable. Professor Zirin addressed the class before departure. This exercise is not about winning. It is about cooperation. Every team will receive identical equipment. He pointed toward 4 sealed supply packs. You may not request additional resources. If something breaks, he smiled knowingly. You solve the problem. Maya quietly adjusted her backpack. This feels familiar. Kale glanced at her. You've done this before? My parents loved camping. Sea camping. You know? She smiled. Sleeping outside. Kale looked horrified. Voluntarily, a transport shuttle carried the students deep into the preserve. As the aircraft disappeared into the clouds, silence settled over the valley. Every team immediately rushed to gather supplies. Some searched for water. Others began constructing shelters. Maya simply looked around. She knelt and scooped up a handful of soil. Then she looked toward the trees. Finally, she watched the clouds drifting overhead. Dravos frowned. What are you doing? Trying to understand where we are. We already have a map. The map tells us where. She smiled. I'm trying to learn how this place behaves. Within an hour, several teams had already built temporary shelters. Kale looked at Maya. We should begin. She nodded. But not here. Dravos folded his arms. Why? She pointed toward the valley floor. If it rains. She traced a line across the ground. This entire area becomes a river. Everyone looked around. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then Sira noticed shallow grooves carved into the earth. Ancient flood channels. Watermarks stained nearby rocks several meters above their heads. Professor Zirin, observing from a distant drone, quietly smiled. Excellent observation. The team climbed to higher ground. Instead of building a large shelter, Maya suggested something unexpected. Let's build two. Kale looked confused. Wouldn't that waste time? It depends. She divided the available materials. If one collapses, she shrugged. We still have another. Dravos stared at her. You always have a backup plan. My dad never trusted only one solution. By sunset, dark clouds covered the preserve. Thunder echoed across the mountains. Several students looked nervously toward the sky. Professor Zirin checked the forecast. So, he whispered. The weather system arrived earlier. Rain began gently. Then it became a storm. Powerful winds tore through the valley. Trees bent violently. Students scrambled to secure their shelters. One team's structure collapsed almost immediately. Another flooded within minutes. Maya's group watched from their elevated position. Their first shelter lost part of its roof. She calmly turned toward the second. Everyone inside. Kale blinked. You expected this? I hoped I was wrong. The storm continued throughout the night. Lightning illuminated the mountains. Cold rain soaked the valley below. By morning, nearly half the teams had lost most of their supplies. Maya's team still had everything. Not because their shelter was stronger, because they had prepared for failure. The second day introduced another challenge. Each group received an emergency message. Scenario update. A simulated rescue beacon had activated several kilometers away. An injured survey drone required retrieval. Teams had 6 hours. The terrain was steep and uneven. Most students hurried directly toward the beacon. Maya didn't. She stopped beside a fast-moving stream. What now? Kale asked. She looked downstream. The water's rising. Dravos sighed. We're wasting time. No. She picked up a long branch. We're saving it. An hour later, the stream had transformed into a rushing river. Several teams became trapped on the opposite bank. Maya's team crossed first using fallen logs while the water remained shallow. By the time they reached the beacon, only one other team had arrived. The damaged survey drone lay beneath a collapsed rock formation. Sira examined it. It's trapped. Dravos pushed against the stone. It won't move. Maya crouched beside the debris. Don't force it. She studied the rocks carefully, then smiled. These aren't supporting the weight. She pointed higher. Those are. Everyone followed her gaze. A much larger boulder rested precariously above the trapped drone. If we pull the wrong rock, she whispered, everything comes down. Kale suddenly understood. Again, she wasn't trying to solve the obvious problem. She was looking for the hidden one. Together, the team carefully shifted the correct stones. Within minutes, the drone slid free without disturbing the unstable cliff. As they prepared to return, a loud cracking sound echoed overhead. Everyone looked up. The heavy boulder had begun to move. Dravos froze. Sira stepped backward. Kale couldn't react. Move, Maya shouted. She lunged forward. Instead of trying to stop the boulder, she shoved Kale sideways with both hands. The enormous rock crashed exactly where he had been standing. Dust filled the air. Silence followed. Kale slowly looked up. Maya. She sat several meters away, breathing heavily. A shallow scrape covered one arm where she'd struck the rocks. You okay? She asked first. Kale stared at her. You pushed me. Well. She smiled weakly. You were in the way. Back at the observation center, the instructors replayed the incident. Professor Zirin folded his arms. She didn't hesitate. One instructor nodded. Most species instinctively protect themselves first. Another quietly added. She protected someone else. The room became silent. Director Alaric watched without speaking. Finally, he said, This is the report I was waiting for. Everyone turned toward him. The galaxy believes humanity became strong because Earth was dangerous. He slowly shook his head. No, they became strong. His eyes remained fixed on the screen where Maya had pushed Kale to safety. Because they learned that surviving together is stronger than surviving alone. That evening, the teams returned to the academy. Results were announced during dinner. Maya's group had achieved the highest survival score in academy history. Not because they were the fastest, not because they were the strongest, but because they had made the fewest mistakes. As students applauded, Maya looked embarrassed. She quietly leaned toward Kale. I really don't like standing on stages. Kale laughed. I've noticed. She sighed. I miss being invisible. He smiled. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. As the applause echoed through the hall, students no longer looked at Maya with fear. They looked at her with admiration. But somewhere deep inside the academy, someone else had also been watching. Someone who now understood exactly why humanity had been invited into the Galactic Alliance. And they had plans of their own. The applause from the survival trial echoed through the academy for days. Maya wished it would stop. Everywhere she went, someone wanted to ask another question. Is every human that calm? Do children on Earth really learn survival skills? Have you actually seen wild predators? At first, she answered politely. Eventually, she began laughing. You all make Earth sound like a nightmare. A nearby student muttered. Isn't it? She smiled. It depends. Classes returned to normal. Or at least they appeared to. Professor Zirin noticed something unusual. Students who had once competed fiercely against one another had begun working together. The change started after Maya arrived. She never tried to lead. She never demanded attention. Yet somehow, people naturally followed her example. One afternoon, Kale found Maya sitting beneath the floating gardens again. She was sketching something inside a notebook. You draw? She nodded. It helps me think. He looked at the page. It wasn't artwork. It was an engine. Every component had tiny handwritten notes beside it. You study machines too? My grandfather repaired old airplanes. Airplanes. They flew before spacecraft. Kale blinked. You mean, they stayed inside the atmosphere? She laughed. For most of human history. He stared at her. So humans reach space. Without gravity manipulators? No. Warp drives? No. Antimatter engines? She smiled. Mostly controlled explosions. Kale slowly closed the notebook. You're joking. I wish I were. That evening, Professor Zirin announced a guest lecture. The speaker arriving tomorrow is one of the Alliance's leading diplomatic historians. The room became excited. Even Maya looked interested. The next morning, the lecture hall filled long before class began. An elderly scholar entered, leaning on a polished crystal cane. His silver robes marked him as a senior representative of the Galactic Council. He introduced himself. My name is Chancellor Varek. I was present when humanity first contacted the Alliance. The room instantly became silent. Even Maya sat up straighter. Varek activated a holographic star map. For thousands of years, he began. The galaxy believed intelligent civilizations followed predictable patterns. As technology advanced, they became physically weaker. They relied more heavily on machines. They became increasingly specialized. He paused. Then we discovered Earth. A picture of the blue planet slowly rotated above the classroom. It contradicted every prediction. Students listened intently. Humans were technologically creative, yet physically resilient. Highly emotional, yet remarkably logical under pressure. Capable of fierce competition, yet equally capable of extraordinary cooperation. He smiled gently. They confused every model we possessed. A student raised 4 hands. If humans are so remarkable, why did the council classify their biological records? The chancellor looked around the room. Finally, his eyes rested on Maya. If Miss Carter permits, I would prefer she answer. Every head turned toward her. Maya looked surprised, then slightly uncomfortable. She stood slowly. The files weren't classified because humans are dangerous. She paused. They were classified because people kept drawing the wrong conclusions. Silence filled the room. When the first surveys described Earth, she continued, everyone focused on our strength, our gravity, our predators, our endurance. She smiled faintly. But none of those things explain humanity. She looked toward Kale. Strength isn't what makes us human. She looked around the classroom. We're curious. We make mistakes. We argue. We help strangers. We invent things that shouldn't work. Soft laughter spread through the hall. And sometimes, she admitted, they explode. The chancellor laughed louder than anyone. After the lecture ended, students surrounded Maya, not to ask frightening questions, but ordinary ones. What games do humans play? What music do you like? Do families really eat together every evening? What does rain smell like on Earth? For the first time, they weren't studying humanity. They were simply getting to know a human. Maya answered every question with a smile. That night, far below the academy, a hidden transmission reached Director Alaric. The encrypted message contained only one sentence. The exchange has exceeded expectations. Proceed to Phase 2. His expression darkened. An aide stepped forward. Sir, Alaric slowly locked the terminal. It has begun. The council has approved the evaluation. The students. They believe this exchange program is about education. The director looked through the observation window toward the brightly lit academy. It never was. The aide frowned. What is it really about? Alaric answered quietly. We already know whether humanity is intelligent. We already know they're resilient. We already know they're adaptable. He folded his hands behind his back. The only question remaining is whether the galaxy is ready for them. Unaware of the conversation taking place beneath the academy, Maya walked across the campus with Kale. The evening sky glowed deep violet. 2 moons reflected across the crystal lake. Kale suddenly asked, Maya, can I ask something personal? She smiled. Sure. Why did you volunteer? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched the moons for several moments. Finally, she spoke. When I was little, my grandmother used to tell me that every person you meet knows something you don't. Kale listened quietly. I wanted to see if that was true across the stars. She smiled. And so far, it is. Kale looked at her thoughtfully. You know, when you first arrived, I was afraid of humans. And now, he smiled. Now I'm afraid for anyone who underestimates them. Maya burst into laughter. Fair enough. They continued walking beneath the stars, neither of them realizing that the greatest challenge of their lives was about to begin. The following Monday, every student at the Grand Orion Academy received an emergency summons. Classes were suspended immediately. Faculty members hurried through the corridors with expressions no one had seen before. Even Professor Zirin looked unusually serious. The entire second-year class gathered inside the Academy's central auditorium. Whispers spread rapidly. Did something happen? Was there an attack? Is this another simulation? No one knew. Director Alaric himself stepped onto the stage. It was the first time most students had ever seen him in person. He surveyed the room before speaking. Students, what I am about to tell you is confidential. Every conversation stopped. For the next 72 hours, you will participate in the Alliance Integration Evaluation. Several students exchanged puzzled looks. Professor Zirin hadn't mentioned any such exercise. Alaric continued. This is not an examination. It is not a competition. It is an opportunity. A holographic image appeared behind him. It displayed a remote research colony on a barren moon called Asteris 9. 3 research domes stood against endless gray plains. A damaged communications tower leaned at an angle. Emergency lights flashed across every structure. The colony has suffered a catastrophic systems failure. Oxygen production is unstable. Power reserves are critically low. Medical facilities are overwhelmed. A timer appeared. 72 hours. This scenario is based on a real emergency that occurred several years ago. He looked around the auditorium. You will work alongside students from different disciplines. You are expected to solve problems that no single species can solve alone. Teams were assigned. Maya found herself with Kale, Syrah, Dravos, and 3 new students. A quiet engineer named Lauren, a medical specialist called Nessa, and a towering miner from the heavy-gravity world of Korath named Brun. Brun folded his massive arms. So, who's leading? Everyone looked toward Maya. She immediately shook her head. Not me. Dravos looked surprised. Why not? Because I don't know everything. She smiled. And that's exactly why teams exist. The transport arrived at Asteris 9 several hours later. The colony looked abandoned. Dust storms swept across the gray landscape. Solar arrays lay twisted across the ground. Emergency beacons blinked weakly. As soon as they landed, every team received identical mission objectives. Restore power. Repair communications. Treat injured colonists. Stabilize oxygen production. Evacuate if necessary. Time was already running. Most teams immediately split apart. Engineers rushed toward the power station. Doctors headed for the medical dome. Security students searched the perimeter. Maya remained still. Brun frowned. Aren't we moving? We are. She knelt beside the shuttle ramp. What are you looking at? The footprints. Everyone stared. Fresh tracks crossed the dust. Some were deep, others barely visible. She quietly followed them with her eyes. They evacuated supplies first. She pointed toward the storage dome. But nobody carried medical equipment. Nessa blinked. You're right. They must still have functioning medical systems. She looked toward another building. And these? The engineers kept returning to the reactor. Kale suddenly understood. The main problem isn't medical. It's power. Maya nodded. If we restore electricity. She smiled. Half the colony fixes itself. Inside the reactor building, sparks flew from damaged control panels. Warning alarms echoed continuously. Lauren immediately began examining the circuitry. It's overloaded. Brun stepped forward. I'll force the access hatch open. Wait. Maya raised a hand. Listen. Everyone fell silent. Beneath the alarms, a faint rhythmic clicking echoed through the room. Tick, tick, tick. Dravos looked around. What is that? Maya followed the sound. She traced it to a damaged coolant pipe. The pressure valve. Lauren's eyes widened. It's about to rupture. Brun stopped immediately. If I'd forced that hatch, the vibration would have triggered it. Maya nodded quietly. Then we'd have lost the reactor. 2 hours later, power returned to the first habitat dome. Lights flickered back to life. Oxygen generators restarted. Cheers echoed through the colony. Students from nearby teams applauded. One problem solved. 4 remained. The next challenge came unexpectedly. A violent dust storm rolled across the moon far earlier than predicted. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Communication signals disappeared. Every team became isolated. Professor Zirin's voice crackled briefly over the emergency channel. Maintain position. Static. Avoid unnecessary. More static. Good luck. Then silence. Kale looked around nervously. We've lost contact. Maya tightened her helmet. No. We've lost radio. She pointed toward the ground. We still have each other. She pulled a thin rope from her emergency pack. Brun laughed. You brought rope. My father never traveled without it. Within minutes, every member of the team was connected together. If visibility vanished completely, no one could become separated. Simple. Old-fashioned. Effective. Hours passed. The storm intensified. Then, a distress beacon activated. Not far away. Nessa checked her scanner. Life signs. 3. The signal came from a collapsed research dome. Without hesitation, the team changed direction. Inside the damaged structure, they found 3 trapped researchers. One had an injured leg. Another was unconscious. The third desperately tried to move fallen debris. Brun immediately grabbed the largest metal beam. I'll lift it. Wait. Maya shouted. Everyone froze. She pointed upward. The ceiling had cracked. If you lift that beam, the roof comes down. Brun slowly released it. What do we do? Maya scanned the room. Then she noticed a maintenance drone half buried beneath debris. Lauren, can you repair that? The engineer looked surprised. It might work. You've got 10 minutes. While Lauren repaired the drone, Maya and Nessa stabilized the injured researchers. Brun carefully supported weakened walls using emergency braces. Kale monitored structural vibrations. 10 minutes later, the drone activated. Instead of lifting the beam, it slid underneath it. Hydraulic arms expanded. The weight shifted safely. Only then did Brun remove the remaining debris. The trapped researchers crawled free. No collapse. No injuries. No unnecessary risks. Back at the command center, Director Alaric watched the rescue in silence. One officer smiled. They succeeded again. Alaric slowly shook his head. Look closer. The replay slowed. Every student contributed. Every idea mattered. No one dominated. No one was ignored. Finally, the officer understood. It wasn't Maya. Alaric nodded. No, it was the team she created. He folded his hands. That is humanity's greatest gift. They don't just solve impossible problems. They make everyone around them better at solving them too. As the 72-hour evaluation neared its end, every team returned to the Central Command Dome. Exhausted, dirty, proud. Scores appeared above the stage. Maya's team had once again finished first. But something unexpected happened. Instead of celebrating their ranking, the judges announced another result. Highest cooperation index in Academy history. The auditorium erupted into applause. Maya looked embarrassed. Brun laughed loudly. You really don't like attention, do you? She smiled sheepishly. Not even a little. Kale grinned. You should probably get used to it. She looked toward the audience filled with students from dozens of worlds. Just weeks ago, they had looked at her with fear. Now, they looked at her with trust. And for Maya Carter, that meant far more than finishing first. The awards ceremony ended with laughter, photographs, and more congratulations than Maya knew how to handle. As soon as she escaped the crowded auditorium, she let out a long sigh. I survived. Kale caught up with her. You sound like the ceremony was more dangerous than the survival trial. It was. She adjusted the strap on her backpack. At least rocks don't ask you to smile for pictures. Kale laughed. You humans are strange. So I've been told. Life at the academy slowly settled into a routine. Students no longer whispered when Maya walked past. Instead, they waved. They invited her to study groups. They argued over board games she had introduced from Earth. One evening, she even convinced Kale, Syrah, and Brun to try making simple human pancakes in the academy kitchen. The results were mixed. Brun somehow managed to burn water. I don't understand, he protested. I followed the instructions. You forgot to turn the heat down, Maya said, trying not to laugh. There was a heat setting? The kitchen erupted with laughter. For the first time since arriving, Maya felt completely at home. The peaceful routine lasted exactly 12 days. At 6:13 Academy Standard Time, every communicator on campus emitted a sharp emergency tone. Priority notice. All faculty and exchange students report immediately to Assembly Hall 1. No explanation followed. Students hurried through the corridors. Even the instructors looked confused. Inside the enormous Assembly Hall, Director Alaric stood before a massive holographic display. His expression was more serious than anyone had ever seen. Behind him floated the image of Earth. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Alaric waited until the hall became silent. 3 hours ago, he began. A deep space exploration vessel lost contact near the Perseus Drift. A damaged starship appeared beside Earth's image. The vessel carried scientists from 12 Alliance worlds. He paused. And a human crew. A murmur spread through the audience. The ship's emergency beacon was activated. But long-range scans have failed. No rescue fleet can reach the area for at least 4 days. Professor Zirin frowned. For days. The nearest military fleet is conducting relief operations in another sector. A student raised a hand. If rescue is impossible, why are we here? Director Alaric looked across the room. Because the ship transmitted one final message before communications failed. He enlarged the recording. Only 6 words appeared. Tell the academy, trust the students. The room became silent. Kale whispered. They're talking about us. Maya didn't answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the message. Something about it felt intentional. Director Alaric continued. The council has approved an unprecedented decision. He looked toward the second-year students. You will assist in planning the rescue. Confused voices filled the hall. We're students. We've never commanded a rescue mission. We're not qualified. Alaric nodded. Correct. But fresh perspectives often solve problems experienced minds overlook. He activated another display. Hundreds of sensor readings filled the air. navigation charts, power signatures, life support logs, radiation maps. Every piece of information collected before contact was lost. You have 6 hours. Every team may propose one rescue strategy. The Alliance will evaluate every proposal. The room immediately exploded into activity. Groups gathered around holographic tables. Arguments began almost instantly. Some suggested dispatching unmanned drones. Others recommended waiting for military reinforcements. Several teams believed the crew was already beyond saving. Maya quietly examined the star charts. Kale noticed. "You've barely spoken." "I'm thinking." She enlarged the final sensor log. Something caught her attention. "That's strange." Lauren leaned closer. "What?" "The power consumption. It drops." She traced the graph with her finger, then rises again. Sarah frowned. Could the reactor be failing? Maya shook her head. No. If the reactor failed, she highlighted another chart. Life support would have dropped too. But it didn't. Everyone stared at the data. Brun scratched his head. So what does it mean? Maya looked toward the star map. It means someone shut systems down on purpose. Silence. Kale slowly nodded. They were conserving power. Exactly. She zoomed in farther. And look at the navigation data. The ship had slightly altered its course only minutes before disappearing. They weren't drifting. They were heading somewhere. Somewhere specific. Hours later, every team presented its conclusions. Most believed pirates had attacked the vessel. Others blamed equipment failure. One group proposed a solar flare. When Maya's turn arrived, she stood quietly before the council representatives. "I don't think the ship was attacked." Several officials exchanged glances. She continued, "I think the crew found something." She pointed toward the navigation records. They changed course voluntarily, then reduced power to avoid detection. She enlarged a region of empty space. They were hiding. One council member leaned forward. "From what?" Maya answered honestly. "I don't know. But whatever it was, they believed silence increased their chances of survival." The hall remained silent for several seconds. Then Chancellor Varek slowly stood. He looked toward Director Alaric. "Interesting. Very interesting." After the presentations ended, students returned to their dormitories. No one expected an answer that evening. Maya sat by the window, looking toward the distant stars. She couldn't stop thinking about Earth, about the people aboard that missing ship, about the 6 mysterious words. "Trust the students." A gentle knock came at her door. Kale entered. "You haven't slept." "No." "You think they're still alive?" She nodded. "I do." "What makes you so sure?" Maya smiled faintly. "My grandfather worked in mountain rescue. He used to tell me something." "What?" "Hope isn't a strategy." She looked out at the stars. "But you should never stop looking while hope still exists." Kale quietly repeated the sentence. Then he looked toward the window. Somewhere beyond those stars, a human crew was waiting, and neither of them realized. The Alliance Council had already made its decision. Late that night, inside the secure command chamber beneath the Academy, Director Alaric received a priority transmission. A fleet admiral appeared on the holographic screen. "We reviewed every proposal." And the admiral smiled. There was only one that matched the classified evidence. Maya Carter's. Alaric wasn't surprised. "So," he asked quietly, "are we proceeding?" The admiral nodded. "Immediately." He paused before adding, "And Director, your evaluation is complete." Alaric looked toward the Academy one final time. "No," he replied softly. "The evaluation has only just begun." The Academy awoke before dawn. No bells rang. No announcements echoed through the halls. Yet every student sensed something unusual was happening. Military transports filled the skies above the campus. For the first time in the Academy's history, Alliance warships hovered overhead. Maya stood outside her dormitory, staring upward. Kale hurried toward her. "Have you seen the sky?" She nodded. "I don't think this is another exercise." Neither of them spoke for several moments. A shuttle landed quietly in the center courtyard. Instead of soldiers, Director Alaric stepped out. He looked directly at Maya. "Miss Carter, we need you." Inside the command center beneath the academy, dozens of officers surrounded enormous holographic displays. Star maps rotated slowly. Long-range scans flickered across floating screens. The atmosphere was tense. As Maya entered, every conversation stopped. She immediately felt uncomfortable. "I think you've mistaken me for someone important." Several officers smiled. Director Alaric didn't. "No. We've brought in exactly the person we need." A holographic image of the missing exploration vessel appeared above the conference table. One section blinked repeatedly. "We found it." Maya's eyes widened. "You did?" A patrol vessel intercepted a weak emergency signal. The room became silent. "But," Alaric continued, "the situation is more complicated than we expected." The image zoomed outward. The damaged ship floated near an enormous region of distorted space. Nothing beyond the boundary appeared clearly. Even the stars seemed twisted. "What is that?" Kale whispered. One scientist answered quietly. "A gravitational distortion. It shouldn't exist." The lead astrophysicist stepped forward. "Our rescue fleet cannot enter. Every probe we've sent has lost navigation. Autopilot systems fail. Artificial intelligence becomes unreliable." Brun frowned. "So send people." "We did." The scientist lowered his head. They never returned. Silence spread across the room. Director Alaric turned toward Maya. "Your proposal suggested the crew intentionally hid." "Correct. We now believe you were right." He enlarged the final transmission. "They weren't hiding from pirates. They were hiding." He paused. "From the anomaly itself." Maya looked confused. "How do you hide from space?" The scientists exchanged uncertain glances. "No one knows." Hours later, the council approved a rescue mission. Not led by admirals. Not by generals. By scientists. Engineers. Doctors. And one academy student. Maya stared at the mission assignment. "This has to be a mistake." "I'm 19. Chancellor Varric smiled. "Exactly." She looked even more confused. He continued. "Older minds often become prisoners of experience. You still ask questions. That makes you valuable." Several military officers objected immediately. "This is reckless." "She's a civilian." "A student." Director Alaric calmly answered. "Every recommendation she's made has proven correct." He looked around the room. "Until someone has a better explanation, we follow the evidence." No one spoke. 12 hours later, the rescue vessel Horizon Dawn departed the academy. The crew consisted of experienced Alliance specialists. Maya was the youngest person aboard. As the ship entered hyperspace, she stood silently beside the observation window. Kale approached. Nervous. She laughed softly. "Terrified." "You don't look terrified." "My mom always said courage isn't the absence of fear." "What is it?" She smiled. "It's deciding something else matters more." 3 days later, the distorted region appeared ahead. Every officer on the bridge fell silent. It looked impossible. Space itself shimmered like rippling water. Stars bent into impossible curves. Sensors produced contradictory readings every second. One navigator whispered, "I've never seen anything like this." Neither had anyone else. As the ship approached, alarms suddenly activated. Navigation failure. Inertial guidance offline. Autopilot disconnected. The captain grabbed the controls. No response. The vessel slowly began drifting toward the distortion. Engineers rushed between consoles. Nothing worked. Maya quietly watched the sensor data. Then she noticed something. "Captain." "What?" "Turn everything off." The bridge became silent. "Excuse me." "All active scanners." "Navigation." "External targeting." "Everything." The chief engineer stared at her. "That would leave us blind." She nodded. "I know." Director Alaric looked at her carefully. "Why?" She pointed toward the display. "The disturbance reacts every time we transmit." She enlarged the energy graph. "When we're quiet, the distortion becomes stable." The scientists checked the readings. She was right. The captain hesitated only briefly. "Deactivate all active emissions." One by one, the bridge went dark. No radar. No scanners. No targeting systems. Only basic life support remained. Silence. Complete silence. Then, the violent shaking stopped. The ship stabilized. No one spoke. One scientist whispered. It worked. Using only visual observation through the forward windows, the crew slowly guided the ship into the anomaly. It felt less like flying, and more like drifting across perfectly still water. Minutes passed. Then an officer gasped. There, far ahead, the missing exploration vessel floated quietly inside the distortion. Its lights were still on. Its engines were cold, but it was intact. Maya smiled for the first time in hours. I told you. They were hiding. As Horizon Dawn approached, a weak communication signal reached the bridge. Static filled the speakers. Then a tired voice spoke. About time. The bridge erupted with cheers. They're alive. The captain answered immediately. This is Alliance Rescue Vessel Horizon Dawn. We have you. The response came after several seconds. We knew. Someone would figure it out. Back at the academy, thousands of students watched the live transmission. The room exploded into applause. Professor Zirin smiled proudly. Kale watched the screen without blinking. He remembered the frightened girl who had walked into his classroom only weeks earlier. She hadn't changed. The galaxy had. Inside the rescue ship, the captain looked toward Maya. You just saved 200 lives. She smiled awkwardly. I mostly guessed. The chief scientist laughed. No. He shook his head. You observed. And then you understood. Director Alaric quietly looked out the bridge window. Humanity had once again proven something the galaxy had failed to understand. Their greatest strength wasn't their muscles. It wasn't their endurance. It wasn't even their intelligence. It was their willingness to question assumptions everyone else accepted as fact. And that, he suspected, would change the future of the galaxy forever. The rescue mission returned to the Alliance 2 days later. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Assembly, every major member world interrupted its regular broadcasts to cover the arrival. Crowds gathered outside orbital stations. Students packed the Academy auditorium. News drones floated silently above the landing platform. Maya stared through the shuttle window and groaned. Oh no. Kale smiled. What? There are cameras. There are hundreds of cameras. She buried her face in her hands. I knew I should have stayed home. Brun burst into laughter. You crossed half the galaxy. You were never going to stay hidden. As the shuttle doors opened, thunderous applause echoed across the station. The rescued scientists stepped out first. Many were exhausted. Some leaned on medical staff. Yet every one of them paused before boarding the waiting transports. Instead of speaking to the reporters, they turned toward Maya. The oldest scientist slowly walked over and extended his hand. Thank you. She shook it awkwardly. I didn't really do much. The elderly man smiled. You reminded us that curiosity is stronger than fear. Later that afternoon, the Grand Orion Academy held a special assembly. Students from more than 50 civilizations filled the enormous hall. Professor Zirin stood at the podium. I have taught at this academy for 37 years. He paused, looking across the crowd. I have watched brilliant engineers, exceptional soldiers, and extraordinary scientists graduate from these halls. He smiled. But every few generations, a student changes something far greater than grades. He looked toward Maya. They change people. The audience rose to its feet. The applause lasted several minutes. Maya wished the floor would open beneath her. When the cheering finally settled, Chancellor Varek approached the center of the stage. He carried a small silver case. This medal, he said quietly, has been awarded only 12 times in Alliance history. He opened the case. Inside rested a simple blue crystal surrounded by a ring of silver. The Star of Unity. He walked toward Maya. For demonstrating that cooperation, compassion, and courage remained the greatest strengths of any civilization. Maya blinked. I don't think I deserve this. Varek smiled warmly. That is precisely why you do. He placed the medal gently in her hand. The audience applauded once more. That evening, after the celebration ended, Maya escaped to her favorite place on campus, the floating gardens overlooking the Crystal Lake. The academy had grown quiet again. The stars reflected on the water below. Footsteps approached. Kale sat beside her. You disappeared. I needed some quiet. He nodded. I understand. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Kale looked at the medal resting beside her. Are you happy? She smiled thoughtfully. I think so. But mostly, she looked up at the stars. I'm relieved. Relieved? I came here hoping people wouldn't fear humans. She laughed softly. I didn't expect them to become my friends. Kale looked across the peaceful campus. When you first arrived, I believed your species was dangerous. Maya raised an eyebrow. And now? He smiled. I still think humans are dangerous. She sighed dramatically. Kale. He laughed. Not because you're violent. He looked toward the lake. You're dangerous because you make everyone question what they believe. You make strangers work together. You solve problems no one else notices. And somehow, he shook his head with a smile. You make impossible things feel normal. Maya looked down at the water. My grandmother used to say something. What? Leave every place a little kinder than you found it. Kale smiled. I believe you have. Several days later, the semester officially ended. Students prepared to return to their home worlds. The academy, once filled with constant noise, slowly grew quieter. Maya packed the last of her belongings into a single travel bag. A knock sounded on her door. When she opened it, she found nearly her entire class standing outside. Brun held a large box. Syrah carried several wrapped packages. Dravos awkwardly avoided eye contact. Kale stood in the front. We wanted to give you something. Maya looked surprised. You didn't have to. Brun interrupted. Open it. She lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of small gifts. A crystal carved by Syrah. A navigation compass from Dravos. A woven bracelet from Nessa. A collection of handwritten messages from every student in the class. Even Professor Zirin had included a letter. Maya's eyes became watery. You guys. She laughed through the tears. You're really trying to make me cry. Brun grinned proudly. Mission accomplished. Everyone laughed. The next morning, the academy gathered one final time to watch the departing shuttles. As Maya boarded hers, she turned back toward the crowd. Thank you. Professor Zirin smiled. No. He shook his head. Thank you. The shuttle doors closed. Moments later, the engines ignited. The transport slowly lifted into the brilliant morning sky. Students continued waving until it disappeared among the clouds. Months later, a new semester began. Professor Zirin stood before another classroom filled with nervous first-year students. The doors opened. A young exchange student stepped inside. The class immediately turned to look. The professor smiled knowingly. Welcome. Please, come in. As the student walked toward an empty seat, one nervous alien quietly whispered to another, I've heard humans are terrifying. Before Professor Zirin could answer, Kale, now serving as a student mentor, smiled. They can be. He looked toward the stars beyond the classroom windows. But if one ever offers you a hand, he smiled warmly. Take it. You'll never regret it. Years later, historians would write countless books about humanity's first generation in the Galactic Alliance. Many focused on Earth's technology. Others praised human resilience. Some studied their remarkable adaptability. But the most famous history text ended with a single sentence. The galaxy did not learn to trust humanity because humans proved they were the strongest. It learned to trust them because one ordinary young woman reminded billions of strangers that the greatest discoveries begin with curiosity, kindness, and the courage to help one another.